Welcome to While We Were Distracted, the podcast where we explore topics that often get overshadowed in the rush of daily life.
Imagine this scenario. You pull out your phone, you order a sleek, futuristic, driverless car to get across town, and it pulls up to the curb.
Right.
It's smooth, it's silent, and it is totally empty. You hop in feeling like you are living squarely in the year 2050 or something.
Yeah, living the sci-fi dream.
Exactly. And the ride is absolutely flawless right up until the vehicle suddenly stops dead. Like right in the middle of a busy intersection. The steering wheel isn't moving, traffic is backing up, horns are blaring all around you.
Oh, man, the anxiety.
Right. And when someone finally logs in to troubleshoot this incredibly advanced piece of American technology, the person who is looking through the car's cameras, trying to fix the situation, they're sitting at a computer desk thousands of miles away in the Philippines.
It's an incredibly jarring mental image.
Yeah.
Because you have this stark contrast between the physical reality on the street, like the immediate tension of a traffic jam, people yelling, and then this completely invisible, deeply globalized digital infrastructure that is actually holding the entire operation together.
That tension right there, that captures the core mission of today's deep dive. We are exploring the massive, often very messy gap between the idealized promise of autonomous vehicles, specifically looking at Waymo today, and the highly complicated, very human reality of actually scaling them on public roads.
Yeah, it's a lot more complicated than just taking the driver out of the front seat.
Oh, absolutely. And we're pulling from a really diverse stack of sources to figure out how this works. We have a Department of Transportation press release from Representative Buddy Carter. We're looking at a legal brief detailing the closure of a massive federal safety probe into Waymo. We've also got some excellent technology reporting on a tense Senate hearing regarding this exact issue, and local news coverage of a spectacular robotaxi failure during a major blackout in San Francisco.
It's a fascinating cross-section of data, honestly, because on one end you have federal regulators who are, looking at spreadsheets and macro statistics.
Right.
But then on the other end, you have local politicians dealing with really angry residents, and you've got geopolitical tensions brewing on Capitol Hill. Removing the human from the driver's seat doesn't mean humanity has been removed from the equation. It has simply been displaced.
Well said. Which means we need to look at how a technology that was literally designed to eradicate human error, has somehow become a lightning rod for human labor disputes, geopolitical tensions, and local safety panics.
Yeah, the irony is thick.
It really is. So I want to jump straight into the regulatory landscape because looking at our JD Supra legal brief, there is the glaring disconnect between what the federal government considers safe and what the average person might actually experience on the streets.
We'd get into it.
So back in July of 2025, the NHTSA formally closed a 14-month federal probe into Waymo, and their conclusion was that they found no systemic safety violations.
Which, on paper, reads as a massive victory for Waymo. I mean, the parameters of that federal probe are important to understand here. Regulators looked at 22 specific incidents involving 440 Waymo vehicles.
Okay.
And out of those 22 incidents, 17 were collisions.
Wait, 17 collisions?
Yeah, 17. The reports noted the vehicles violating traffic control signs or acting unpredictably around them. But the regulators anchored their decision on one really critical data point. Across all of those incidents, there were 0 reported injuries.
Okay, I see the 0 injuries, and I see the regulators praising Waymo for their thorough data analysis and, rapid incident response. The brief mentions 2 major proactive recalls.
Right, yeah.
In 2024, they recalled 672 vehicles after a robotaxi literally hit a wooden utility pole in Arizona. And then in May 2025, they recalled another 12,212 vehicles to address a software glitch related to detecting roadway barriers like chains and gates.
Yeah, the barrier detection issue.
But let's just pause there for a second. Why are stationary chains and wooden poles tripping up billion-dollar sensors?
It basically comes down to how these sensors process physical matter. So LiDAR works by bouncing laser pulses off objects and measuring how long they take to return.
Yep.
That creates a 3D point cloud of the environment.
Like a digital map of the street.
Exactly. But a thin metal chain, it doesn't offer a lot of surface area for those lasers to bounce off of. It returns a really scattered, weak signal. So the software's sensor fusion algorithm then has to decide, is this weak signal a solid barrier, or is it just exhaust smoke or a flock of birds or just random sensor noise?
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and in the case of the chains, the algorithm basically filtered the data out. It just treated it as background noise.
Okay, let's unpack this because that makes sense technically, but I struggle to square these regulatory gold stars with the local reporting from like Slash Gear and the LA Times. We aren't just talking about cars scraping against thin gates or anomalous wooden poles.
No, we're definitely not.
The local news is full of bizarre, super high-stakes stories. We've got Waymos driving onto train tracks, Waymos casually cruising right into the middle of an armed police standoff.
Which is wild to think about.
Right. And the government even had to investigate them for passing stopped school buses. And sadly, it extends way beyond property damage. A Waymo vehicle ran over and killed a dog.
That was awful.
And then in October, one tragically killed a beloved community cat named Kit Kat. So I have to push back on this idea of no systemic violations. It feels to me, anyway, like a student getting an A on their written driving test because they technically memorized the textbook rules, but then failing basic common sense by driving straight into a police barricade.
That's a really good way to put it.
How can a system clear federal safety hurdles with flying colors but still cause so much absolute chaos in the community?
What's fascinating here is that to understand that disconnect, we have to look at the fundamental difference between statistical safety and public trust.
Okay, lay that out for me.
So, federal regulators operate on the macro level. They want to see robust safety management systems, rapid software patching, continuous statistical improvements across millions of miles.
Right, the big picture data.
Exactly. If a fleet drives millions of miles without injuring a human, that is a statistical triumph compared to the baseline of a distracted human driver. But the community isn't interacting with a statistical average. They interact with the physical vehicle in front of them.
And the physical vehicle in front of them is apparently, rolling through active crime scenes.
Right, because of what engineers call edge cases. See, human drivers navigate the world using context and intuition. If you see flashing lights, yellow tape, police officers with drawn weapons, your human brain instantly understands the semantic meaning.
Right, you think, this is dangerous, I should back away.
Exactly. But an autonomous vehicle doesn't have semantic understanding. It uses that sensor fusion we talked about to see geometric shapes, speeds, and trajectories. It sees a gap between two parked police cruisers and just calculates a mathematically clear path forward. It doesn't inherently understand the social context of a police standoff unless it has been explicitly programmed to recognize the hyper-specific parameters of that exact scenario.
So it's basically applying rigid mathematical logic to an entirely illogical, chaotic environment.
Precisely. And the reality is that the physical world presents an infinite number of these edge cases. To bridge that gap between rigid programming and chaotic reality, these cars aren't actually independent.
They're not.
No, they rely heavily on a digital tether to a hidden human workforce. When the car gets confused by an edge case, it literally phones home for help.
That reliance on a data feed sounds fine in a vacuum, but the moment the physical infrastructure fails, the illusion of independence completely shatters. Look at what happened in San Francisco on December 20th, 2025.
Oh, the blackout.
Yes, the blackout. A massive citywide power outage hit the grid. And according to the local CBS News coverage, when the power went out, it took the city's 5G cellular network down with it.
Which is the lifeline for these vehicles.
Exactly. The moment that 5G signal died, the Waymo fleet lost its connection to that hidden workforce. Now, most of the cars managed to pull over and park safely, but 63 of these vehicles completely lost connection and froze dead in the water right in the middle of busy intersections.
You have to remember, during a blackout, when traffic lights are already out and panic is high, 63 immobile vehicles become a severe infrastructural hazard.
Absolutely.
Several of these frozen robotaxis were allegedly blocking access for emergency vehicles trying to navigate the gridlock.
Yeah. San Francisco City Supervisor Bilal Mahmoud described the phenomenon perfectly. He noted there are hundreds of vehicles moving about the city like Cinderella's magical carriages.
I love that quote.
It's so good. But he says, just like the fairy tale, those carriages can turn into pumpkins at the drop of a hat.
Yeah.
Waymo was actually forced to send their project manager, Sam Cooper, to City Hall to formally apologize. He admitted to severe communication gaps with the city's Department of Emergency Management. The mayor even had to personally call Waymo to get through to them that night.
Which really highlights a major vulnerability in the teleoperations model, especially regarding scale.
It absolutely does, especially when you look at the numbers Cooper revealed under oath at City Hall. Waymo admitted that at any given time, they only have about 70 global dispatchers on call to assist cars that need human intervention.
Wait, 70?
Yes, 70 people for an entire global fleet. When the blackout hit, their system wasn't just disconnected. The queues were completely overwhelmed. But I keep getting stuck on the technical mechanics of this. If these cars are heavily marketed as autonomous, why do they require an active 5G connection just to pull over to the side of the road safely?
That is the big question.
Are the human operators actively driving them via remote control?
The mechanics of the intervention are crucial here. The remote operators aren't sitting at a desk with a gaming steering wheel and pedals.
Oh, they're not.
No, they use a teleoperation interface. They look at the car's LiDAR point clouds and camera feeds, and they draw digital waypoints. They basically nudge the car, telling the software, hey, it is safe to cross this solid double yellow line to get around the double park delivery truck.
Oh, I get it.
But transmitting high-definition sensor data and receiving encrypted waypoints back requires massive, uninterrupted bandwidth and extremely low latency.
I picture it like trying to play a fast-paced, competitive, multiplayer video game over terrible hotel Wi-Fi.
Yes, exactly.
The input lag is brutal. You see an obstacle, you press a button to react, but because of packet loss, by the time your command registers on the server, the situation on the ground has entirely changed.
That is a highly accurate comparison. If a remote operator is looking at a compressed video feed over a fluctuating 5G cellular connection, even a 1-second delay can be catastrophic. Yeah, because at 30 miles per hour, a car travels 44 feet in a single second. If the operator misjudges the speed of an oncoming fire truck because the video feed lagged, the remote guidance could inadvertently cause a collision.
That is terrifying.
But to answer your earlier question about why the cars didn't just pull over autonomously when the network failed, we have to look at an incredible insight from engineering professor Billy Riggs at the University of San Francisco.
What did he say?
Professor Riggs points out that the onboard computers are more than capable of executing a safe, independent stop without cellular service. The robots absolutely could have pulled over.
Wait, what? Then why freeze in the intersection and block traffic?
Because human regulations mandated the 5G connection for continuous oversight.
You're kidding.
No. The law essentially dictates that these vehicles must maintain that digital tether to home base to ensure a human can always monitor them. As Professor Riggs observed, we set ourselves up for failure because we don't have faith in robots. The cars froze because their programmed compliance with the rules told them they were legally not allowed to make independent decisions without that oversight capability active.
Oh, wow. So we've established these cars aren't truly autonomous. They are remotely chaperoned. And ironically, the very regulations designed to ensure safety through human oversight are what paralyzed the fleet and blocked emergency responders.
Yeah, exactly. It's a huge paradox.
Which completely changes the risk profile because now we have to ask who is holding the leash. If these vehicles depend on a human safety net to function in complex environments, who is sitting at the keyboard and, where are they located?
And that single question has pushed autonomous vehicles entirely out of the realm of just being a local traffic nuisance and dropped them squarely into the center of a massive federal political storm.
Which brings us to the technology reporting covering the Senate hearing convened by Senator Ted Cruz in early 2026. Waymo's chief safety officer, Dr. Mauricio Pena, was really put in the hot seat. Under sworn testimony, Dr. Pena admitted that some of Waymo's remote assistance operators, the people providing that crucial digital nudge, are actually located overseas in the Philippines.
Now, Dr. Pena was very careful to delineate roles during his testimony. He explicitly stated, they provide guidance, they do not drive the vehicles. Waymo also clarified that they maintain a separate U.S.-based event response team dedicated specifically to emergency coordination with local first responders.
Okay, so the offshore workers handle the routine edge cases like telling a confused car which lane to take around a construction zone, while the U.S. team handles the actual 9/11 level emergencies.
That's the structure they've set up, yeah.
But that operational nuance did absolutely nothing to calm the political firestorm. Because when you look at the political fallout in our sources, you see two very different but equally intense arguments emerging from across the political spectrum.
Yeah, everyone had a reaction to this.
Right. On one side, according to the local coverage, you have labor and safety advocates. Outside San Francisco City Hall, Teamsters and SEIU leadership were actively protesting. A Teamster named Peter Finn demanded the city put people above robots, while SEIU President Teresa Rutherford argued that non-human tools require rigorous checks and local human control. We are just reporting what the sources say here, but the union's stance is very clear.
And that same safety argument was elevated to the federal level by Democratic Senator Ed Markey. According to the reporting, he approached the offshore operators from a strict risk management perspective.
What was his main concern?
He argued that relying on remote operators outside the United States poses a direct, critical threat. His logic is rooted in that latency issue we discussed earlier. When an American street presents an unknown, dangerous situation, a split-second intervention might be required. Senator Markey's position is that relying on an international connection for a critical safety check introduces inherent, unavoidable risk.
Okay, so that's the latency and safety angle.
Right.
But looking at it from a completely different angle in the reporting, you have the national security and jurisdictional perspective. Republican Representative Buddy Carter wrote a formal letter to Department of Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy. In it, he demanded a full investigation into the use of foreign-based remote drivers.
Right, the jurisdiction issue.
Exactly. Representative Carter's argument centers on the idea that foreign nationals who are outside of U.S. jurisdiction are exerting active influence over American traffic flow and emergency responses. Again, just sharing the viewpoints contained in the original source material.
Yeah, and the DOT press release notes that Representative Carter raised specific logistical concerns. He questioned whether operators thousands of miles away can adequately understand American road signs, local traffic laws, or even the nuances of the English language on handwritten construction placards.
He actually used a very stark example to underscore his safety concerns in that letter. He cited a tragic October 2025 collision in California where an illegal immigrant commercial driver caused a crash on the I-10 freeway that killed 3 people.
I remember reading that part.
Yeah, Carter utilized that specific tragedy to argue that prioritizing corporate cost-cutting over rigorous, localized safety standards and domestic vetting can lead to fatal consequences on American highways.
And the geopolitical pressure doesn't end with labor and national security. According to the Senate hearing coverage, it immediately bleeds into global trade and protectionism.
Oh, for sure.
During that same hearing, Senator Bernie Moreno challenged Dr. Pena on Waymo's hardware supply chain.
Specifically, the partnership with the Chinese automaker Geely. Waymo is partnering with them to design a Zeekr brand electric minivan. Waymo maintains that the minivan itself is designed in Sweden and the actual self-driving software is installed right here in the U.S.
But Senator Moreno pointed to the underlying economic reality. Building a bespoke, sensor-laden electric vehicle in the United States using domestic labor is phenomenally expensive.
Right, the costs are huge.
Exactly. And Chinese electric vehicle manufacturers are producing EVs at a fraction of that cost. For a company like Waymo, buying Chinese hardware in bulk makes incredible economic sense. But Senator Moreno's argument is that flooding the American market with fleets of cheap, Chinese-manufactured robotaxis places immense downward pressure on a U.S. domestic auto manufacturing sector that is already struggling to transition to electric vehicles.
Yeah, he's basically arguing that allowing this supply chain compromises American industrial independence.
Yes, that's the core of his point.
Okay, let's pause here. So, what does this all mean? I keep thinking about my earlier point regarding the blackout. It's conceptually similar to a city outsourcing its emergency 911 dispatchers to another country just to save on municipal budgets. How can a remote operator sitting at a desk thousands of miles away in a completely different time zone truly grasp the immediate physical nuance and urgency as a chaotic street crisis in San Francisco?
If we connect this to the bigger picture and you synthesize all these separate tensions, the local outrage over pets being hit, the labor disputes over job displacement, the national security concerns over foreign hardware and operators, it really reveals the ultimate dilemma driving the autonomous vehicle industry.
Which is?
Waymo's objective isn't to build an expensive novelty. Their goal is a permanent paradigm shift. They want to make robotaxis as ubiquitous and affordable as ordering a rideshare today.
But you cannot achieve that massive scale and cheap price point without aggressively cutting overhead costs.
Exactly. To make the economics work, companies are inherently incentivized to utilize cost-effective hardware from overseas and highly affordable international labor for their digital safety nets. But the moment they optimize for cost, they step out of the realm of pure software engineering and place themselves squarely in the crosshairs of global trade wars and profound national security debates.
Yeah.
The hardware and software might be autonomous, but the business model is deeply, inextricably entangled in human geopolitics.
Wow. It really reframes the entire experience for you, the listener. The next time you see one of those sleek, empty cars quietly humming down the street, or, the next time you pull out your phone to order a convenient ride home, it's worth considering the invisible infrastructure making it possible.
Yeah, it's never just a car.
No, it's not. Stepping into an autonomous vehicle doesn't just mean trusting a computer with your commute. You are physically stepping into a highly complex, incredibly fragile web of international labor, federal regulation, and geopolitical tension.
And that brings us full circle to that fundamental question of trust raised by Professor Riggs earlier. We currently demand this massive, complicated web of human oversight, the mandatory 5G connections, the remote operators in the Philippines, the emergency response teams, because fundamentally, we still don't fully trust the AI to drive us safely.
Right. We want that safety net.
We insist on keeping a human hand hovering over the invisible steering wheel. But here's a thought for you to mull over as this technology continues to exponentially improve. Will there soon come a day where our demand for forced human intervention, like forcing a car to freeze in an intersection while waiting for an operator to assess a lagging video feed, is actually statistically more dangerous than simply letting the robot handle the emergency on its own?
Man, that is a wild thought to leave on. The idea that our own psychological need for control might eventually become the biggest safety hazard on the road. If the Cinderella carriage stops, maybe it's best we don't try to force it back into a pumpkin. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the technology shaping your world, keep looking past the surface, and we'll be right here to unpack it with you next time.
Don't forget to like and subscribe for the next episode on While We Were Distracted.